All right, let's talk about Florida. If your nonprofit is planning to fundraise in the Sunshine State, you absolutely need to know their specific rules for charitable solicitation. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what that means for you.
Just a quick note, this explainer is brought to you by our friends at Ironwood Registrations. They're the specialists who help nonprofits just like yours handle fundraising compliance all across the country.
You know, a lot of nonprofits think that once they get that 501c3 status from the IRS, they're good to go. They can start fundraising anywhere, right? It's a really common assumption, but is that actually true for Florida?
Yeah, the short answer is nope. Florida, just like a lot of other states, has its own set of rules. So if you're planning on asking for donations from anyone living in Florida, you've got to register with the state first. Let's walk through what that actually looks like.
Okay, so first things first, who actually has to register? Let's figure out which organizations fall under these rules.
The main rule is pretty simple, actually. If you're asking people in Florida for contributions, you have to register. And it doesn't matter if your organization is based in Florida or, say, California. The key thing to remember is you have to do this before you start fundraising. It's all about being transparent from day one.
So what does Florida consider solicitation? Well, their definition is really broad. It covers pretty much every modern way you can think of to raise money. We're not just talking about old-school direct mail here. This includes your email campaigns, that Donate Now button on your website, your social media fundraising, even events you hold in the state, they all count.
All right, so now we know who needs to register. Let's get into the practical side of things. How do you actually get it done?
The whole process can be broken down into 3 basic steps. First, you fill out the application. You can do that online or by mail. Second, you gather up all the required documents and attach them. We'll get to what those are in just a second. And third, you pay the registration fee.
Okay, let's talk documents. You're going to need to pull together a few key things for your application. Some of this is standard stuff, like your IRS determination letter and your latest Form 990. But here's a little heads up. Florida specifically asks for a certified conflict of interest policy. That's not something every state requires, so it's a good one to be aware of.
Now, what about the fee? In Florida, it's not just one flat rate for everyone. It's actually on a sliding scale that's based on your organization's annual contributions. It can range from $0 for the smallest groups all the way up to a max of $400.
Of course, with rules, there are usually exceptions. Not every single organization has to go through this full registration. So let's take a look at some of the exemptions and special cases that might apply to you.
So Florida does have exemptions for certain types of organizations. We're talking about religious institutions, schools, government agencies, and also membership groups that only ask their own members for donations. And here's a really key point. If you fall into one of these categories, you're just exempt. You don't have to file any special paperwork with the state to prove it.
Okay, this is a super important point, so listen up. A lot of states will give small charities a pass. They'll have an exemption based on how much revenue you bring in. Florida, they don't do that. There's no general exemption just because you're small. This is a critical detail because it means that even tiny nonprofits usually have to register. But while there isn't a blanket exemption, Florida does have a kind of simplified option for smaller groups. If your contributions are less than $50,000 and you don't use any paid professional fundraisers, you can use something called the Small Charitable Organizations application. It just makes the whole process a little bit easier.
So, getting registered is step 1. But it's not a one-and-done kind of deal. To stay compliant, you've got to keep up with the annual requirements.
And this is a big one. You have to pay really close attention to the renewal deadline. A lot of states just tie it to your fiscal year end, which is easy to remember. Not Florida. Your renewal is due on the anniversary of the day you first registered. It's a totally unique date for your organization, so you have to make sure you track it carefully every single year.
And just so you know, that deadline is firm. Florida will not give you an extension on the renewal application itself. Now, you can get an extension for turning in your financial documents. Usually you just show them a copy of your IRS extension for that. But the renewal form itself has to be in on time. All right, let's wrap this up. I want to leave you with a few key ideas on how to stay in good standing with Florida for the long haul. Look, staying compliant really is an ongoing job. You've got to actively monitor your status, you've got to track that unique anniversary deadline we talked about, and you have to get your reports in on time. The best way to do it is to just build these checks right into your annual calendar.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that Florida's rules are just more structured and detailed than what you might find in other states. This is definitely not a place where you can just start fundraising and hope to sort out the paperwork later.
It really does require you to be proactive and pay close attention to the details.
Look, we know managing all these requirements can feel a little overwhelming. If your organization could use some help with charitable solicitation registrations, whether it's just in Florida or across a bunch of states, you can learn more from the specialists over at ironwoodregistrations.com.